Did you know that there are over 40,000-year-old paintings out there? Because neither did I when I started this project. My name is Natalie Seedall, and my project is Anybody Can Be an Artist. So a little background story. Anybody that knows me knows that I love art. Ever since it was from my first little seating mat picture with when I got to decorate with dragonflies, or to the art pictures that I've been able to put in art shows that I've gotten first and second place. There's something so magical about art, whether it's the fact that someone can paint a picture of a landscape and you're instantly transported to that place, or that they can paint a picture of emotion and you can feel that emotion. It's just so fascinating to me. Now, my freshman year, a teacher came up and told me that I should figure out what I want to do for my senior project now, because when it gets to my senior year, it'll just surprise me, and then I'll have to figure it out then. And I got that same advice my sophomore year, and the same advice my junior year. And they were right, my senior year did sneak up on me, and I had to figure out my project. Except for I didn't have to figure it out all the way, because I knew I wanted to do something with art, because I've always wanted to be an artist. Ever since I was in kindergarten, whenever someone would ask me, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd always say an artist. So, starting this project, I sat down and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I realized that I know nothing about art. Well, I know some techniques, and I know how to paint and sketch, but the history of art or when art began, I had no idea. So that's where I got my idea for my senior paper. I was going to focus on 3 main topics: the history of art, how art intertwines with culture, and how many different types of art there actually are. So the first topic that I'm going to talk about is the history of art. And there are 3 to 4 main eras that I want to focus on. The first era is prehistoric era. So that's like caveman, and that's where that 40,000-year-old paintings came from. And when I was doing this, I automatically thought, okay, caveman, they painted stuff on the walls, good. But I was so surprised to find out that it was actually more than that they used these paintings for an intellectual reason, and that you would use it to communicate or to make maps, and I was just so shocked, because any people living then could just write something on the wall to communicate to a friend or to show where they were going to be, and it was so cool. The next era that I want to talk about is the medieval and Renaissance era. Now, I put these 2 together because they're pretty similar and they happen a year after each other, but the main thing that separates the medieval from the Renaissance is that the medieval era was more focused on religious part of art. Everything that they made was religious art, and the Renaissance was the beauty of man and the beauty of nature kind of art. And so they were very different in that reason alone. And in the Renaissance time era, there were so many different discoveries, scientific outbreaks were happening all over the place. Anatomy was getting more into it, and it was just beautiful. And so many famous artists came out of here, like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, and it was just a great time. The last and final era that I want to talk about is the modern era, because that's the era we're living in now, and we're so blessed to have all this technology, because if we want to learn to paint something, we can Google up, hey, how do you paint an oil painting, and we can learn how to do it. And also, technology is its own form of art in a way, because you have all the graphic design. I mean, just look at what they're doing with all the movies these days. So, yeah. Now, the next topic that I want to talk about is culture, because throughout all of history, culture would morph the way different people would do art. So I only focused on 2 main cultures for my paper, and that was Vikings and Native Americans. And it was so interesting to see all the similarities and differences that they had. For instance, Native Americans, they'd focus on more Mother Nature and spiritual things. Everything they made would have a deeper meaning. If a necklace had a certain symbol on it, it could mean bravery. And Vikings, they still had meanings and all that, but it was more of to decorate and to be visual pleasing and to show ownership. But one thing they both had in common was their intricate details to everything. It's kind of hard to see, but this is a shield for Vikings, and it has up close, it has so many little details, and of the fish and dragons, they have each one of the little scales. And on this one, this is a totem pole from Native Americans, and a totem pole would just show which family ancestry they belong to. But on both of these, you can see how much detail were put into them. The next thing I want to talk about for this part, for my paper, is the different types of art. Because just now, I can think of like 20 different types of art. But for time's sake, I'm just going to focus on a couple that don't really get noticed as much as art. So the first one is dance. Then the second is poetry, ceramics, and theater. There's so many, and people don't really realize it. A quote that I found that fits perfectly with this is by Seth Godin, and he says, "Art is not only a painting, art is anything that is creative, passionate, and personal." And I feel like that just fits perfectly into my topic. So throughout going this whole paper, I was also starting my actual project, and through learning about the culture and stuff, I realized I wanted to create and show my own culture in this art piece that I was making. And I grew up with a lot of camping and fishing, and my grandpa works at a cow ranch, and so I always helped with the cows, and I wanted to show that in my picture. But I also wanted to try something new that I've never done before. And so I remembered this picture that I took of my sister a couple years ago of her fishing at our favorite fishing place in Island Park. And it just fit so well because, one, it involved my culture, and two, it had trees and water. And I've tried to ignore trees and water for the longest time because it has scared me so much because I have no idea how to do them. But I put on my big girl pants and I got started. So the first thing that I did was I sketched out this whole picture in pen because I wanted to do a mixed media with pen and acrylic paint. So this is the final sketch that I did. And after that, I went into all the shadow places and put brown, which you can see on the jacket and on the rocks, and on the hat too. And then after I did that, I put in a wash, which is acrylic paint and water paint, and I put that on everywhere pretty much of the right colors. In the second picture, I did more of a wash so you can see. But on this rock, I started to put a gray wash over it, and I realized that the brown is showing through too much. So I had to go in and put a darker, thicker paint of gray over the rocks to make sure the brown was avoided. In this next picture, all the washes are done and the trees are done, and you can see on the rocks that they are more gray and not brown. So for the trees, I was super nervous, like I said, and my art teacher and my mentor, Mr. Coles, gave me the advice of just to shape in the shapes of the trees and not try to focus on every little pin needle because it was a pine tree, like I was trying to do. And so that's what it is. That's the basic shapes. And then throughout, I just kept having to go in and add darker layers and darker paint and all of that. And it took a lot of time, but it's okay because it was worth it. So in this next picture, I added the highlights so you can see it on the hat and in the water. And I pretty much was finished at this point, and so I decided to take a step back and look at it from afar and find the things I needed to fix. So I noticed a couple things. First of all, the trees were okay. I mean, they were kind of thin and not as dark as I wanted them to be, so I needed to go back and fix them. And I also noticed that there was a tangent, which is where two objects have the same line and it's not pleasing to the eye, right there. And there was a weird halo around the fishing pole. So I went back in and I fixed all of those. I extended the hat a little bit. I fixed the paint around the fishing pole so it didn't have that halo effect, and I added more and darker trees. And this is the final product that I have. You can see that I fixed the tangent right there. I extended the hat longer. And yeah, I feel like it turned out pretty good and I'm very proud of myself. And I would have it here today to show you a live version, but it's actually in Boise right now at an art competition, so hopefully I win. So through this project, I have learned so much. I've learned all about the history stuff, about the cavemen that I never knew, and about the difference between the medieval art and the Renaissance art, and I also have gained a lot of patience. Thank you so much for your time. Do you have any questions?